I heard you were talking to a guy and you were saying, like, we don't know how the universe got started. We don't know how life started existing. So logically, God is the best explanation. Is that
Not exactly how I put it, but I see where you're getting at.
so? Like this is what I wrote down. We don't know how the universe was created. We don't know how life started existing. Because we don't understand how nature could have done it, God is the best explanation.
So that would be an extreme nutshell, but you could say that.
Okay, you can feel free to. I don't want to like have like a 5-minute like qualifier over it, but like if you were to say it differently, what would you say?
So if I were to summarize it more fluently, because from what I understand, you're a science teacher, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I can probably go a little bit more into depth with you. So like for the universe, right? The universe had a beginning. That would be consensus with science today. And then, of course, I would agree with that, not only scientifically, but philosophically. So I would use the Kalam as an instance to explain that. Or I would use the Leibnizian cosmological argument. And so to me, we have whatever created the universe would have to be spaceless, timeless, immaterial, and at minimum, it would have to be outside of the universe to create the universe, because how could you create the universe within the universe that doesn't exist yet? And then you would have to be, it would make more sense that you would be conscious to intentionally make the decision to create the universe rather than the universe just appearing unintentionally. We've never seen anything with specified complexity get created unintentionally. We've only seen that done intentionally. And when I say specified complexity, like a computer or a car, something of that nature, that's specified complexity. So it would be reasonable to believe that a mind or something with intelligence and consciousness would be responsible for the creation of all of existence as we know it. And then we could go deeper into the existence aspect, but I'll cut myself off there before we do that.
Okay, sure. There's like some tangents we could go on with that, but that's not it, and we can do that in a little bit. But so, how did God do any of those things?
So, like, speak the universe into existence?
Sure.
Well, if you obtain, like, if you are spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, you have the ability to create matter from non-matter.
How?
There would be no laws of these physics that if there's no universe that existed at that time, you could do that.
How?
Because that law didn't exist yet.
Yeah. How did he do it?
I mean, like, there's no scientific way to explain it, because
Then why
science is
believe it?
an exploration through the natural world. This is a philosophical argument, not a scientific argument. And so,
yeah, but why
if
believe
the universe began? Because we know the universe began.
Yeah, but I agree that the universe appears to have a beginning point in time, but why say therefore this unfalsifiable but also unprovable entity is responsible for it? If you can't explain
Well, it's
how
not
he did it.
unfalsifiable.
God is unfalsifiable?
I
Or
said
God
it's
is not unfalsifiable?
From a scientific perspective, it wouldn't be fair to say he is. No, you could disprove it. You got a better explanation?
I wouldn't say you could disprove his existence, I guess. That's what I meant. I was talking about God, the thing, not like the idea that God made this hat. I guess we could say that's like scientifically falsified. That claim is scientifically falsifiable. But I'm talking about the existence of the thing.
Okay. So if we're talking about the existence of God, I would say that it. Did you hear me talk about the argument from consciousness?
Sort of. But
Okay.
it's just sort of like saying like it makes more sense that a conscious agent did it. Okay, but I'm asking how. Because again, the original thing was like the reason, because we don't understand how nature could have possibly created life from non-life, for example, or how a universe could be created. Like I heard you say God's the more logical explanation. And so I'm asking you now, How did God do any of those things?
So God can operate outside of the laws of physics, being that he existed prior to the laws of physics existing. So in this,
Okay, so how does he do it? You're just telling me again that God does these things. How?
so literally, he can speak it into existence. So non-matter
How?
to matter.
Yeah, how?
I'm literally telling you, he's speaking it into existence from matter or non-matter to matter.
Okay,
Life
describe
from
describe how that happens. Like I can tell you
Yeah,
that we can
it's
create
like-
quarks because the potential energy field between the two of them, if you pull them apart, the potential energy field grows so large that matter is created from energy. Because of Einstein's equation, we know that that's possible. And so I can describe the process that actually makes that happen. So how did God make...
But wait a minute now,
do
you're
anything?
using the laws of physics, right?
I know, I'm telling you, it was just comparing something completely different. I was just explaining
Yes.
that if we claim something can happen, we're saying matter can come from energy. How? Here's an example. You take two quarks, you pull them apart, the force between them, the potential energy field is so large that it creates matter between them. Cool. How did God create life? How did God make the universe exist?
So again, you can explain that within the laws of physics. I can't explain scientifically how God did that because he did it outside of the laws of physics. I don't quite understand how the world works outside of the laws of physics. But I can conceive of matter coming into existence with non-matter. I can conceive of time, like have you ever heard of, you're into the relativistic physics, if you're talking about Einstein, are you familiar with cosmic time or absolute time?
Time is relative.
So within our physical time here, yes. So you know how Newton talked about absolute time, and then there's a local time, and then Einstein changed that with the theory of relativity. Well, Einstein did not change cosmic time. And so I'm actually reading a book on this right now called Time and Eternity by William Lane Craig. And he goes through how a lot of these physicists...
He's not a scientist. Why would you get your information on physics from William Lane Craig? He's an apologist.
I mean, he's a PhD in philosophy and theology. He's
not a
really
physicist.
intelligent guy. So if you don't have the authority, you can't speak. That's a logical.
Why would you?
fallacy.
Okay, we are talking about the kinds of physics that, like,
Time is a philosophical study too.
sure, but
More so.
this
than
book sounds like
physics,
it's
I would say.
pretending to be a science book.
Well, he uses work from scientists like the ones I just named in order to determine the conclusions he's coming to. The purpose of the book is to show how God exists out of time. But what I'm trying to say is that you can use philosophy to study time. In fact, in order to get to science, you have to have sound philosophy. So I'm not sure why I wouldn't be able to use a book from William Lane Craig to understand science. Anyways, what I'm trying to say
Because he's not
is
a
that
science. Well, if the point of the book is to make purely philosophical arguments for God existing outside of time, then okay. But it sounded like this. I mean, we were talking about Einstein and relative time, and so William Lane Craig wrote a book about, like, it sounded like it was a physics textbook. That's why I was like, why on earth would
No.
that was the thing that I was like, wait, what?
No, physics is mentioned quite a bit in the book, but specifically to show the battle of how time, our knowledge of time has come from the time of Newton till today. And there were people that I can't think of the name on the top of my head right now, but Einstein's theory of general relativity, or SDR, not GTR, special theory of relativity, that's for our local time. Right, you know, an airplane traveling way above us as opposed to us here is going to have quite a little bit different of a time than we are. That's due to STR.
Well, barely
But-
different, but yeah.
But that would show the validity of STR, right? And I'm
Yeah.
talking about the time scale of, for example, the universe expanding with the cosmic background radiation. That time is not relative. That time is staying as is according to it, whatever timeline it's on, that's not relative to it, like in the same manner that our local time is.
Okay.
You follow me here? Do you not agree?
I've never heard about this, and I'm like I would throw you over to like Blitz or somebody who's a physicist to argue about this kind of very different aspect of time. So, I mean, I'll just take your word for it.
Okay.
But I'm confused as to what this has to do with how did God make the universe exist?
What I'm trying to say is that this is something I can't scientifically explain how God took matter or made matter from non-matter, how God created our time when there was no physical time at T0. Before T0, that doesn't make sense from a physical time perspective, how that happened. I can't explain to you scientifically how he made space from non-space.
Okay.
I can't scientifically explain that, but I can philosophically explain to you that whatever did cause those to begin to exist must have existed outside of the physical laws that they're bound with.
But we could live in a
couldn't have
simulation
come into existence,
and then that wouldn't be true.
But then there would have to be a simulator to have created the simulation.
It wouldn't have to be a supernatural being. We could live in the Matrix.
We could live in the Matrix, but
okay. Well, I'm saying it doesn't. To say it must be a timeless, spaceless, immaterial God. That's just
no. I'm saying
it doesn't.
I'm
it's not the case that it
God.
must be. It could be.
If it were God, God must have these attributes. Yes.
Okay, if it were God, God must have those attributes. But to me, it sounded like you said, therefore, the only thing that could create our universe would be this. No, we could live in a simulation.
But then something would have had to create the universe that the simulator is in.
Yeah.
That the simulator exists within. So that you would just backtrack. And the same argument would go for the universe.
Well,
that
maybe
the
people that created our universe or simulated our universe live in a universe that doesn't have a beginning point or whatever. I don't know what that would look like.
Then you fall into the infinite regress issue.
Well, so does God.
But God would be a way to get through the uncaused first cause.
So is this universe.
Foundation.
It's uncaused. The universe that contains the whatever that creates the simulation for us, same thing. It's uncaused.
So you're saying the universe that the simulator exists in is uncaused?
It could be. There's no reason to say that it's like not even imaginable.
So it would operate outside of the laws of logic.
Well, it would be a different universe. It would operate according to different principles than ours. I mean, if it's a different universe, then we can't say what happens in that universe.
See, I think at this point we're violating Occam's razor. Like
it's a different universe though. You can't just assume that you know how the laws of physics or whatever work in a different universe. This is kind of beside the point. There's like just one thing we can go into that if you want to next, but the whole reason I asked that was because okay, well, I can just make your argument, but for my side, we don't know how God created the universe. We don't know how God created life. Therefore, nature is the best explanation. There.
So, but the problem is, though, nature is bound by the laws of physics. God is not.
What does that have to do with anything?
Does life come from non-life?
Well, I would argue yes, but I'm not telling you how life did it. I'm just saying nature's the best explanation. You didn't tell me how God did anything.
But again, God can exist outside of the laws of physics, so he's not bound by the laws of physics, which nature is.
Sure.
So nature is not intelligent. Nature is just, it's matter existing within space on a timeline.
Sure.
Right? So have we ever seen, like, well,
have you ever eaten food?
Yes.
Okay, so a molecule goes into a cell. A glucose molecule goes into a cell. That glucose molecule will be broken down according to the Krebs cycle. Is that life?
Mm-hmm. So
is a chemical reaction
those
life?
They're cells. So they're alive.
Cells are alive.
Yes. They are alive.
Yep.
So do you believe that a cell came into existence when there were no cells at, the moment before that? T1
No, it
cell
wouldn't. It wouldn't be
exists,
like
T0
that.
no
it's,
cells.
it's not like a case like instantaneously there wasn't and then there was life. We can get into abiogenesis in a little bit, but it is the Krebs cycle that happens inside of a living cell. Is that life?
The cycle itself.
Yeah.
The cycle is just a process.
Okay. Is the transcription of DNA life?
Well, DNA is part of a cell.
I know.
So you need the lipids, the carbohydrates, and the proteins, along with the amino acids or DNA.
DNA is
I'm
DNA.
sorry,
DNA is not
is
any
the-
of those things. I'm just
You
asking
need-
if the transcription of DNA is life.
You need no. You need more
Okay.
than just DNA. That is a component of a cell.
Sure.
But
So
you need
do you is a ribosome life?
not by itself.
Okay. So what it sounds like to me, you're telling me is living cells are composed entirely of non-living things that undergo chemical processes that aren't life, and that's what makes them alive. So yes, life comes from non-life.
So no, because you would have
No,
to
not no.
explain how all of those
Not no.
came together.
You
and
conceded
formed a
all of
cell.
those things.
No. You're
Yeah, no, yes,
presupposing
you
that
did.
happened.
Every one of those things is not life, but those are the exact processes that make a cell alive. Non-living
understand that.
processes. Life
But
is
I
a
never
bottom-up process, not a top-down process. The entire thing is governed and controlled and regulated and powered exclusively by non-living physical chemistry operating inside of a self-contained system. Well, it's not exact. It's an open system, but we can say it's self-contained because it's a cell. So non-life produces living cells, exactly in a bottom-up
explain
way.
how they came together and formed a cell before the first cell.
I know we're not talking about abiogenesis, but that process right there is non-life creating life.
No,
How is that a no?
because you would have to explain how these parts separately, not being alive, came to be into the cell.
Right. We're not talking about abiogenesis though. We're talking about a living cell.
We're going to go down this trail.
Sorry, what?
You would have to, if you're gonna make this argument, you would have to explain how that happened in order to say life came from non-life.
Does the Earth orbit the sun?
Yes.
How did our solar system get created? Because if you can't tell me that, you can't tell me that the Earth orbits the sun.
So I can tell you that
Is gravity the force that makes Earth orbit the sun?
that would be part of it, but I don't think that's
Okay, where did
entire.
Okay, so how did all that happen?
So are you going to keep asking questions, or are you going to answer what I said?
Well, I'm just demonstrating that. I don't think your question is quite the gotcha that you think it is, because none of us agree that if I don't know how our solar system began to exist, that doesn't mean that Earth doesn't go around the sun. And even I'm perfectly happy to talk about abiogenesis. I'm just trying to stick on this point here. A living cell is. Do you think life is governed in a top-down way or a bottom-up way?
So I would say, being that God is above life, it would technically be top down from that perspective, but I'm not sure I would.
What does that mean?
Really
though?
make either of those assessments. What do you mean by top down, bottom up?
So are the forces that make life possible, do they arrange themselves in a top-down way or in a bottom-up way?
You mean like the strong and weak nuclear forces and gravity, or what do you mean specifically?
How do I want to say this? So like humans, what's a process? Like the economy. The economy is top-down. It's a process that is top-down mediated. Humans make decisions, and then that causes the system to do what it does, right? It's mediated in a top-down sort of way. Whereas a bottom-up process would be more like Oh, what's a good example? Like a hurricane. A hurricane is formed from the seemingly random actions of water currents and evaporation and transfer of energy between the oceans and the atmosphere or whatever. But eventually it produces this like complex storm system, right? But it's completely in a bottom down way. There's no top down thing being like, yeah, we're going to make hurricanes because that's like what we're trying to do. Instead, it's bottom up. That's what I mean.
Yeah, that doesn't really equate. A hurricane comes from different weather anomalies over a period of time, pushing to a point of creating a hurricane.
Yeah,
So
the individual things themselves aren't hurricanes. They're small parts of it, but they come together to create the hurricane. That's bottom up, if you ask me.
Okay, well,
The hurricane is the sum of its parts. Can we say it that way?
Are we like from a meteorological nihilistic perspective way? Is that what you're trying to say?
Meteorological nihilism. What is that?
That's a philosophical belief where you think nothing exists or comes into existence. You think everything already exists and just takes form into one thing or another. So obviously that's not what you're claiming. I had to make sure. So
I had just never heard of that before. I think the standard model of particle physics represents the only real things that there are. If that's what that means, then okay. But that's not what I want to talk about.
I would agree that the hurricane did not exist prior to the formation of the hurricane. Yes. But I'm not saying necessarily, like, I don't see where this bottom up. Like, why is the parts of the hurricane lesser than the hurricane? It's just unintelligent.
The parts of the hurricane are what make it. It is made it is made of a sum of parts that aren't the hurricane, right?
But what does this have to do with bottom up?
Because to me that's what bottom up means.
How does this equate to
because life can only exist from these chemical systems and molecules that aren't alive that work together to create the living chemical system, which is the cell.
Okay. So you mean simpler processes getting into more complex processes. Would that be like a fair way to say it?
You could say that the system is unquestionably more complex than its individual parts, but it is the sum of its parts and their interactions. I mean, that's how a car engine works as well.
Okay, so that would be my if that's what we're saying by bottom up, then I would say yes. That would be a fair analogy.
Okay. Well, I mean, just again, my point is all of the things that make life possible are these non-living components or whatever.
Yes, but what my issue is the explanation of how these non-living, non-conscious components came to be into living and into consciousness.
Well, consciousness is like, I don't know what consciousness is. I don't think you do either. I'm not insulting you. I don't think anybody does. I think the only thing we can say with confidence about consciousness is we're pretty sure we have it, and that I'm pretty darn sure it comes from our brains.
Of consciousness.
Sorry, what?
I can give you a definition of consciousness.
Yeah, like we have definitions of it, but that doesn't mean that we know. Like we know that there's this thing called dark energy in our universe, but we have no freaking idea what it is.
We don't really know that. We assume that. It's a presupposition. It
assume
has to
what?
exist in order to continue the universe to expand.
That's dark energy.
Yeah, we don't know that it exists. We assume.
Didn't I say dark matter?
You said dark energy.
I thought I said dark matter. But I mean, either one.
Dark
either
matter,
one is
same
fine.
thing. We can't test.
They're
that
not the
either.
same thing.
No, I'm saying it's the same problem. We can't test it. I know they're not the same thing.
Right.
Dark
so
energy
dark
exists
matter
outside of the universe. Dark matter is within the universe.
Yeah, dark matter is a placeholder for something we don't understand
It's a gap filler.
fully. Kind of like gravity. I mean, Newton famously said, "I offer no hypothesis." He had no idea what made gravity possible, and then we got a general theory of relativity to explain it. But it's like we have a definition, kind of, sort of, for what dark matter and dark energy are, but we don't know how they work. And I think that's the same deal with consciousness. I think our brains produce it.
Me and God.
Sorry, what?
See, you were giving me issue earlier with me not being able to explain scientifically how God made matter from non-matter or life from non-life. But look what you just did.
What did I do?
You're holding a double standard.
How?
So I don't know how this works, therefore dark matter. I don't know how the universe is expanding, therefore dark energy.
I'm not claiming that dark matter really. Well, I was going to say I'm not claiming that dark matter does anything, but there's a real gravitational effect that we see in the universe, and we don't know how it works, so we call it dark matter. But I don't really see how that's the same thing as God.
Well, actually, it's worse because there's no intelligence behind it. It's just unconscious, unintelligent matter that we have to have in order for our Big Bang Theory to work.
No, we don't have to have it. We had a Big Bang Theory decades before we knew anything about dark matter. That's completely not true at
cosmology. Current cosmology. Yes. That is a huge role in current cosmology.
Yeah? But it's not required for a Big Bang. We've known that the universe is expanding since 1929.
No, we still had what was it called? Steady state theory then. It wasn't until like the 50s.
An expanding universe could mean steady state or Big Bang. All I said was we've known that we live in an expanding universe since 1929.
Okay. So originally, what I was saying, though, is the same issue you have with me and saying that I can't scientifically explain how God made matter from non-matter is the same issue you have with explaining dark matter, with explaining dark energy, with explaining the arbitrary inflation period at the beginning of the Big Bang, and then the same thing from the naturalistic way of life coming from non-life, meaning that all these components to a cell, lipids, carbohydrates, amino acids, and proteins all came together out of nowhere, unintentionally, randomly, into
not randomly
the first cell.
Not randomly. I think you're confusing an unconscious process with a random process.
So I don't necessarily believe in random, more so than just chance or probability. So let's say by chance then.
Right. Well, most people say that pejoratively. They say that to straw man it, right? Like, so you believe in a random explosion created the whole universe. No, I don't believe that, right? So that's why I said it's not random. I think it's important to point that out or whatever. Anyways, keep going.
So what I'm saying is, though, by chance, by very high probability chance, I think Biola University did an experiment on this, and like the best number they can come up with was 10 to the 90th power at a chance of life just forming in a prebiotic manner. And actually, all of the experience...
Those things are so... Do you get that? Where'd you get that from?
Well, Biola University did that. Again, this is a simulation based off of what we think may have to happen in order for life to come. I think simulations to situations that we can't even observe in an experiment are kind of, just fun. You can't really use it as necessarily... I wouldn't make it a theory. At best, it's a hypothesis. But what I can say is that we have the best experiment we have to prove abiogenesis would be the Urey Miller experiment.
No,
all that did was create some
nobody,
amino acids.
No scientist really thinks that the Miller-Urey wasn't an attempt to make life. It was nothing like that.
It was an attempt to see what would happen if we created this gaseous environment that was supposedly similar to a prebiotic Earth.
Yeah.
And so they created a couple of amino acids, and then that blew
11
up.
amino acids.
But then they realized, then they did it again in the 80s, and I think they created less amino acids the second time. And then they realized that there was a problem with like the cleaner they used for the vials and things like that could have gotten in the way. And so to this day, like if you look at the top chemists in Origin of Life, what's that guy over at Cambridge University? Lee...
Nick Lane?
No.
Oh.
His first name is Lee. I can't remember his last
Harvey
name.
Oswald.
No.
I don't know.
Oh, what is this guy's name? But he's if I can remember this dude's name. Have you ever heard of Dr. James Tour?
Have you ever heard of Professor Dave, who's done an extensive review of all of his work and I think has decimated it? They're going to do a debate too. So.
You should probably watch the refutation from Dr. James Tour, because I've watched both sides, and Dave, he's like using a lot of ad hominems, personally attacking the dude over and over again.
Yeah,
He
he's
also
kind of
uses
militant.
argument, like when you use a lot of logical fallacies in your argument, that doesn't look good. But then on top of that, like this dude, it's not like he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's been a synthetic chemist for like 40 years, and then he uses experiments, shows the paper. But in this specific category for abiogenesis, biologists aren't looking at this. Chemists are looking at this because the chemists are the ones who are doing the experiments to try to show how this happened. I guess maybe some biochemists are. I'm sure biologists are involved, but the big names, which I'm still stupidly can't name to you right now outside of Lee Cronin, that's his name.
Okay.
But all the experts that Professor Dave brings on in those, right? Bruce, I can't remember Bruce's last name either. But if you watch, not Bruce Jenner, if you bring those on, if you watch the video, you see all the guys that he brings on, they all end up apologizing to Dr. Tor for misquoting him in emails that he puts on screen, or they end up saying they agree with him, or they end up saying, I didn't know that Professor Dave was going to use this information to try to attack you. All of them admitted that all of this different information, all the experiments that they did where they supposedly created either a lipid or an amino acid or whatever, they were all not done in a prebiotic manner. They had to buy, already made carbohydrates, which I think that is the hardest component to make of a cell, or already made lipids and carbohydrates, or the three parts, and then make the amino acids and then put it together and try to make the cell function. And they use this, I can't remember the exact term, where they put it in water and they put this anti-hydro material in there to keep the cell forming process away from the water, but yet within the water, so the water protects it from outside problems. Like they do all sorts of crazy things, but still, to this day, we're not even close at getting that done. Not even close. Creating a cell in a prebiotic manner.
Sure. So let's say that the odds that life appeared organically, so to speak, naturally, is extremely low. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, if we have a competing hypothesis, then we should do a statistical analysis to see which one we should prefer, right?
Yes.
Okay, what are the odds that God did it?
You can't do that. You can't scientifically.
Okay, well then the naturalistic explanation is the better explanation by default.
No, because you can use.
What do you mean? No, the odds of yours is apparently 0. It's uncalculatable. It has no value.
If God can exist outside of the laws of physics, if God created the universe, right? We first have to, before we can even get here, if God created the universe, then it's not unfathomable to say that God could create life. God could create the first human, create the first whatever animal, because he just created space, time, and matter.
How?
How could he not create a human being?
How? How did he do it?
Outside of the laws of physics. There are no laws of physics where God existed, so he could speak it into existence.
But that's a non-explanation. That's just a claim.
You can say that.
So nature created life naturally. It's inevitable that nature will do that. That proves it. That's a garbage argument.
But nature had to come into existence. What caused that?
Nature.
Nature can't cause nature. That's circular.
God can't make God exist, or can he? Or can God just exist?
God has always
nature can
existed.
just exist.
God is
there.
existence.
I declare that nature can just exist. It is not contingent. There.
So nature is not contingent?
Correct.
So
I've chosen to define it that way.
What we have observed in real time of the laws of nature itself, is not contingent. That's what you're going to say.
What?
We've observed that nature is contingent. So, like to
things
say that, it's
that
not,
happen within nature, yes, nature itself. Let's just say the universe itself, not contingent. I don't even believe this, but I can claim it.
But we have evidence to show otherwise. We don't have evidence to show otherwise for God, that nature is contingent.
The universe is contingent. You have evidence that the universe is contingent?
Everything within the universe is contingent upon something. Do you agree with that?
But the universe as a whole? No.
So The
Just
universe,
refute the claim.
If gravity did not go at the rate it did at the beginning of the expansion, as Stephen Hawking claimed, and if we're off by 10 to the 40th power, then the universe would have imploded and not expanded at all, and went back to the singularity, or just been completely annihilated entirely.
Okay.
So
we have a multiverse. We have a multiverse
contingent.
concept for this.
Okay, so we're going to go with the Penrose model then. Okay, so if we're going to use the multiverse, we're breaking. Well, I think we're going to be breaking Occam's razor. But if you don't even care about addressing Occam's razor, those multiverses would still be
God is more
contingent.
complex than the universe. God is the ultimate violator of Occam's razor. God's the most complex imaginable thing.
But actually, God is simple philosophically at the same time.
So is the concept of a multiverse, I guess.
No, because the multiverse doesn't
an
negate
infinite,
the fact that
all-knowing, all-powerful being can't. You're saying that that's less simple than anything I could come up with?
Than an infinite multiverse?
An infinite God that is more powerful than the multiverses could make the multiverses pop in and out of existence at his will? Yes, he's more complex than those things.
Are any of those
Otherwise he wouldn't be
multiverses, or are any of those universes within the multiverse non-contingent? Are any of them brute?
I don't know.
So, see, this is the problem you face. So if you're going to say that the multiverse is an explanation, you have to be willing to explain how did those multiverses, or how did the multiverse, those universes within the multiverse, come into existence? And if they didn't, and they
just do. They're
how did they?
Infinite, timeless, whatever characteristics you attribute to God, just attribute to them, except for the being supernatural or whatever.
But God is a simpler and I think more plausible explanation to be the uncaused first cause.
Okay, if it's more plausible, then what are the odds that God created the universe?
The odds that God created the universe?
Yes, you said it's more plausible.
What else is it opposed to? At the moment, there's no contending opposition.
Spanky the hippopotamus did it.
Okay, so is Spanky the hippopotamus immaterial?
Yeah.
So how are you holding it?
Did Jesus walk this earth?
Don't be
Was
trailing
Jesus
off in a different
God?
direction. Is that immaterial that you're holding in your hand?
This is, but that's not. Was Jesus fully man and fully God? Spanky is fully the thing that created the universe and fully this plush purple hippopotamus.
Jesus gave up some of his divine authority and power to become a man.
Okay, Spanky did that too. He literally can't really do anything. This is just a placeholder for him. Kind of like Jesus.
Interesting. So even though you're holding the material, you're saying it's immaterial.
Is God immaterial?
That is an idol. That is an idol.
So right? Then so was Jesus, I guess.
No, Jesus came down as one of the persons within
Was
God.
Jesus God?
Yes.
Okay, so God can be fully man, a material thing, and fully God. Spanky can do the exact same thing. He can be this and be fully whatever the hell he is.
Okay, so can you explain that?
You can't.
I can explain God's three persons in one to a decent extent. So God is a divine essence, right? Immaterial, spaceless, timeless.
So Spanky.
And the Son within the Trinity, so you have the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, they are of equal authority, of different roles that they play within.
Same for him, but it's binary.
Right?
Unlike
Okay.
Jesus, Spanky is not non-binary. He is binary.
Okay. I'm not going to address that because I don't want to get banned. But anyways.
It's just a joke, dude. God is non-binary.
I know.
He's triune.
So I was watching a live earlier before I got on, and this guy was doing an argument. His debate screen was something about gender, and I don't want to get into that because like a lot of his guys.
Neither do I.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So, the problem is what we're doing is by saying that Spanky is all these things, you're just describing God, but you're saying that it's not the Abrahamic God, it's Spanky.
Yeah, different
right?
one.
And so you're actually admitting to theism in a
I don't believe in
condescending.
this.
Okay, then, but so it's a disingenuous argument. So what you're doing though is you're
It's
describing
a
God.
logically equivalent argument to yours.
So you think it is, but what you're actually
But it
doing
is.
is you're describing God. You're
A completely
saying this can
different
happen.
God than you.
So I'm not arguing for the Christian God with this specific argument. I'm arguing for God's existence. If we want to argue for the Christian God, we have to get into the historical arguments, into the arguments for the validity of the Bible. At this point, we're just arguing for a God.
For
and so
a
what you have
God.
done
Okay.
is you've said that this is God. This can do all this. And so what you're saying is that this can do all of this because you think that you're making fun of me. I get it. You're not the first person to do this. You're probably the
I'm not.
100th to do
I
this.
I just go after ideas, not people. You seem like a pretty cool dude. I talk to. You wouldn't believe the morons I talk to. Like seriously, you are not the morons I talk to. it's
thanks.
insane.
Thanks. What
No,
I'm
you're
saying is that, and you're right. You're not attacking me. You're attacking my idea, right? So, what I'm saying is that my idea and yours, at the moment, in what I'm describing, before even moving to Christianity, is the same. Is an immaterial, spaceless, timeless, intelligent, powerful. Everything I'm going to describe, you're just going to
Sure.
say Spanky can do this. Spanky is this.
Sure.
And
Let's
so
do,
at the
let's do it
moment-
this way. Spanky created your God that created this universe. There.
Okay, so then we've admitted that there is a God.
Two of them, sort of. There's
Okay.
super God and then God.
Okay. Can there be an maximally powerful? Can there be two maximally powerful gods?
No, Spanky's more powerful than yours.
Okay. So what evidence do you have of that?
That's just his nature. That's how he's defined. And he personally revealed it to me.
Okay. So any written evidence?
Hundreds of years after this event takes place, some people will scribble some stuff down. We won't know who they are or where they did it or when, but that'll be the evidence.
So until then, we don't have evidence.
Sure.
Okay. Right now, I do have evidence that
You have claims.
the Abrahamic God, that Yahweh
No, you have claims.
would claim to be the maximally powerful God. But none is
Claims
above.
of it. Not evidence of it. Claims of it.
But there is something.
I'm claiming it.
There's something, right? There is a
Well, I'm
written
the
document.
evidence. It was divinely revealed to me.
That has
so
been
it's not
passed
written down.
down.
But I mean, I could write it down right now if you want me to.
Right? So you can write it down right now, but would that one writing withstand to like the veracity of the Bible? Like the historicity of the Bible, the archaeological findings of the Bible to match what the Bible says, and like going down the line.
I could
the Bible
create
is
I could create a computer program that says just summarizes my thoughts on Spanky, and the computer program would automatically generate unique URLs billions of times per second, and then I would let it run for 100 years, and then it would be the single most documented thing in existence.
when
by
that
far.
time comes to be.
You know, it would just take a year or whatever I said, 10 years or whatever. And then that would prove it, except it wouldn't prove it.
And so-
again, these are just claims, not evidence.
But you're not getting what I'm saying.
Sure.
What I'm trying to get at is that we can agree. It seems like the best thing. What you're doing is you're saying that, well, this can be God. So how do you know it's your God? It could just be whatever I make up, right?
What I was trying
It's arbitrary.
this got started so long ago. What I was trying to do is just say like, I lost my train of thought. The purpose was just to be like, you're just making claims, because this all started with what are the odds that God did it? And if you ask, to me, it's 0, right? Because we have a claim, but we don't have we don't have a description of how it works. I wouldn't really argue that we have evidence of it. We just have claims of it, right? So
Also, the description aspect, though, that can fall under the personal incredulity fallacy, right? I don't know how it works.
well,
so therefore
that's
it
how I
didn't
view
happen.
the God did it. It's a God of the gaps. I never say God of the gaps. I always say a argument from incredulity, typically. But we don't know how nature did it, therefore God did it, is the best explanation. How did God do it? I have
So
no idea.
I use inference, though. So I am saying it's logical that something that created space would have to be outside of space. It's logical that something created time would have to be outside of time. Same for material. And then also that something that would create something of such magnitude would probably have to have intelligence. And then also be
Sure.
maximally powerful to be able to do so. And then also be conscious in order to intentionally do so rather than unintentionally do so.
So,
This is inference that I'm using, not just bleh,
but these inferences are not based in evidence. You can make
Of course
I
they
can
are.
make a logical claim where the conclusion is guaranteed by the premises, but that doesn't make it true.
And just hold that thought. Just to let the guests know that are waiting, this will be my last guest. I'm having a lot of fun, and I have to get offline here in
Yeah,
a second.
it's
But
late. I got a long day
dude,
tomorrow.
you should come to my YouTube channel. I know you were on Cease's channel, I think. I see
Yeah.
Cease in the comments. What's up, Cease? You should come on my channel so we can have a live stream where we like go over. You're a science teacher, so I can really pick your brain and give
Talking
me
about,
your
like,
best.
just is your channel like debating or just like interviewing people, and like sometimes like you
Whatever you want.
toss ideas back and forth, but it's most okay. Well,
I haven't had any formal debates. I'm happy to have formal debates. But
I'm happy to
I
have just
also-
conversation. I know that's what I'm
Yeah.
known for dunking on flat earthers and stuff like that, but I'm okay with just like doing
Well,
an interview or whatever.
The Earth is square. Okay.
I have a this is like totally. I don't even want to get into this, but are you a young Earth creationist?
I am.
Okay.
I am. But I don't base my belief strictly off the Bible like many young Earth creationists. I actually have like scientific concerns, which is why I believe in young Earth creation. Am I militant in saying that, well, if you're a Christian and you think that the Earth is old or you believe in evolution, you're not a Christian? No, that's nonsense. Those are not salvation issues. This is just an argument from what I think the science says. You know, I've looked at geology, physics, astrophysics, cosmology. Like I look into the scientific fields to learn this.
We can see billions of light years. That's a very much a problem for the universe being only a few thousand years old.
Well, I have arguments for that. Number one would be the arbitrary measures of inflation, right? Well, why didn't inflation stop just 6,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago? Why did it stop 13.7 billion or 13.6 in a long number billion years ago? But I have many more arguments than that. And I also have models that I've seen from cosmologists to show how the universe could be this old. But this is something we need lots of time. I can't do this.
Right. So what we were talking about before was we were talking about arguments from incredulity, and I said you can make you can make any argument, but that doesn't mean that the premises are true. And then I don't remember where we.
I was saying I was doing. I get the attributes from using inference. I'm not just arbitrarily throwing them out there. And then I interrupted you. Sorry.
Oh. Well, I don't really remember. That's the last thing I remember talking about.
Okay. Where is my... I have one argument I want to give you, and then we'll close after you refute that, because I'm sure you're going to refute it. But it'll be worth it. It'll be worth it. So basically, like when I try to argue for my uncaused first cause, like I have an argument that I use for limits. Let me see if I can find this. Basically, the argument goes like this, and I don't think I have it written down here anymore. But there are limited things, right? Those limited things cannot be explained by other limited things. Those limited things, there must be something that exists without those limits that is purely, and that without those limits to be what is contingent on those things. I said that terribly. Basically, the limited things must be contingent on something that is purely unlimited. Therefore, there is something that's purely unlimited.
Okay. That's I'm not gonna lie, that's kind of confusing, hard to follow. I mean, it just basically sounds like there are contingent things Therefore, there must be something that all things are contingent upon, but is contingent upon nothing else.
Correct. That would be
So
another way to put it.
why would the fact that contingent things exist mean that there must be something that's an exception to this basically like law of reality?
Because of infinite regress and how that's a logical absurdity. So, like I gave this paradox earlier. I'll throw it at you real quick. So, have you heard of the Grim Reaper paradox?
You go back in time and kill your grandpa or whatever.
No.
I have heard of the Grim Reaper. I was just thinking you kill somebody. Now I have heard of it, but now I forget what it is. What is it?
All right,
I know that's a grandfather paradox, but
real quick, it's you have a guy named Fred,
right,
and he's alive at midnight. A Grim Reaper appears and is going to cut Fred down at 1 a.m. Right, and so I think this is similar. I think you're talking about the grandpa paradox, but anyways,
I was.
And so it's similar, right? So you have the 1 a.m. Grim Reaper is going to cut him down at 1 a.m. Then another one appears 12:30 is going to cut him down if he's still alive then. And then another one appears at 12:15.
Yeah. These are called super
tasks.
12:15.
Yep. Right? And so this happens infinitely. Which Grim Reaper
you have what you have is an infinite number of things occurring in a finite amount of time.
I didn't say specifically what time.
No, you said 1 o'clock.
So, well, that was the first one. And then the next one is 12:30. And then the next one's 12:15. The next one's 12:07:30 seconds. And this goes on infinitely in this time split into the negative numbers. Infinitely. So which one kills Fred?
So again, this is a super task. I've heard of super tasks before. We just can't. We don't have enough information to be able to answer these questions. The super task I've heard is there's a lamp, and it's on a timer that runs for 1 minute. After half the time has elapsed, the lamp switches from either on to off. So let's say it starts on. After 30 seconds, it goes off. And then when there are 15 seconds left, it goes on. When there are 7.5 seconds, it goes off. When there are 3 and blah, blah, blah. So after a minute, is the light on or off? It's an unanswerable question because we have an infinite amount of things.
It's a logical absurdity.
Well, kind of, but reality doesn't work that way. Because in reality, we have such a thing as like a Planck time. So in reality, it's actually impossible for anything to occur in less than a Planck second. So you could theoretically answer this question by having it conform, like pure mathematical abstractions
This is what makes
do
it a
not
logical
reflect
absurdity.
physical reality. Sorry?
But this is part of why it's a logical absurdity, because it can't be. We would never know. So if we move the Planck time thing out of the way, that's okay. That's why it's a logical absurdity. What the point is
but what is it? If it's not real, then what is if a logical absurdity presents us with a problem, but the problem isn't real? What's the conundrum here?
Well, the problem itself is that it's a logical absurdity. It makes no sense.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You cannot have, like, for example, you can't have an infinite amount of humans, of parents. There has to have been a first parent. Otherwise, you have an infinite regress, which is a logical absurdity, because you have over and over again the same amount of parents that just keep going, and then where did the first one come from? Like, there has to be that uncaused first cause. This is the Aristotelian concept. This is the Thomistic concept from Thomas Aquinas. Like many old philosophers started this thousands of years ago because of these problems, these logical absurdities. And that's why I was saying the argument from limits, that you have to have whatever all of contingent reality is founded on must not be contingent, at least on those same things. And so if it were unlimited in those regards, that's Yahweh in the Old Testament means I am, which means existence. That's another profound part about the Abrahamic God. Yahweh claims to be the very form of pure existence. But anyways, that's
so spanking.
I wanted to throw it at you. I didn't hear you say that, but
do you like Dan McClellan?
I've watched a couple of his things. He works at that Mormon. He's a Mormon. Well, I can't remember the university he works at. He was a translator
BYU?
for Old Testament.
He works at Brigham Young University, I'm pretty sure.
Isn't that a Mormon university? He's a translator for them, yeah. But I know who he is. I think he has some interesting translations. He, like many other skeptical scholars, like to turn things into sexual things. Like I watched him do a interview with Myth Vision the other day, and he was talking about Jacob wrestling with God and saying God hit Jacob between the legs to stop the wrestling match, and that caused Jacob to have a limp for the rest of his life, which is strange because Jacob had 12 kids after that. I don't know how you could have 12 kids after getting hit so hard there that you can't walk right for the rest of your life. But anyways,
I had hernia surgery. They turned my stuff inside out, dude, and I've got swimmers. Worse. I think worse things have happened.
Well, I know I'm familiar with some of his work. Yeah. What about him?
I just wanted to know what your thoughts were. I like him. I like his insights. They're good. So, yeah. Anyways, it's just sort of a random question.
I would recommend you look at evangelical and skeptical scholars to get a fair assessment.
Well, but there was something we were talking about earlier where I was like, well, who would you rather have investigate this? Oh, when we were talking about James Tour, who would you rather investigate? So, like, to me, I think a scientific, skeptical mindset is healthy and necessary. Because, like, we have always, we are guilty of this today. We're just oblivious to it because all persons are oblivious to it. But there have always been questions that we assert we have the answers to. Like, for example, maybe God is the reason. Oh, like before, what's his name? That pimp, Benjamin Franklin. Before him, everybody assumed that lightning was a supernatural phenomenon because sometimes lightning kills people and lights barns on fire. And so people thought that random acts of nature couldn't possibly be cruel like that. Mm-hmm. If lightning struck my baby, it means that God did it because God sent my baby to heaven. There's justice there. The people asserted that had to be the answer. Now, maybe that's true. But what we should do is we should do everything we can to disprove that claim, right? Because we shouldn't have... It's better to have questions that we haven't answered yet than to assume we have answers that can't be questioned, you know? So... when we were talking about like the James Tour thing and like origin of life, I can very easily see how somebody would take what I'm about to say and be like, that just proves that you're biased or whatever. But I don't totally agree. So here's the point. Who would you rather get like an answer to the question? An apologist, yes, he's a scientist, but he's an apologist who's committed to the idea that God is behind these things. Whose research would you prefer? His or the person that is just totally secular about it? Because science is a secular process, you know. So, well, I shouldn't add so many qualifiers. But to me, well, I'm curious as to what your answer is.
There's a gentleman, prominent scientist who, foolishly, I can't remember his name, who said we must never allow a divine foot in the door in the study of science. Can't remember this guy's name now. But there is an anti-supernatural bias in the scientific community, to the point to where if you go against the grain in anything that can be considered supernatural, you can lose your job. I call that fascism. So to me, I wouldn't. I mean, seriously, if you go against the grain, you lose your job. That's absurd. At least investigate it and prove them wrong scientifically.
But that's not fascism.
Like young Earth creationists, right? A lot of their articles won't get published. They have to publish articles that have nothing to do with young Earth creationism under pseudonyms, because they won't even look at their article. It's frightening. You know the gene gun? Have you heard of this tool before?
The gene gun? I don't think so.
It's what they use to sequence genes, and that's how they kind of discovered genetic entropy. It was invented by a couple of scientists at Cornell, one of them being John Z. Sanford. At the time, he was a secular scientist. He's now a young Earth creationist. If he submits a paper to the National Library of Medicine, for example, even though he invented the gene gun, he can submit a paper doing an experiment with his gene gun that they use today, and they won't take it just because of his name. That's fascism. That's absurd. He has his PhD in genetics. He has like more than qualified.
Fascism,
but I mean, what else would it be? You're silencing someone simply because of their belief differently from you.
But
like this is kind of like what the Nazis did.
Yes, but fascism is it's a political thing.
This is a political thing. Certainly not a logical thing.
Okay, I wouldn't call science politics exactly.
Oh, there's politics in science. Come on.
There's politics in I guess you could say there's politics in the way science is done, which would be a point for your argument. I just don't think
academia,
that fascism is a good word to use for that.
Well, okay, silencing people because they have differing opinions.
Right. It's almost like they're being canceled or something like that.
Yes, canceled. Okay, being canceled. So what I'm saying is that it would depend on, like, because I could use the same logic and be like, okay, well, would you want to learn about evolution from all the people that support it? They're biased towards it. And when I say evolution, I mean specifically Darwinian evolution.
Yes, but
all of life
the
coming
scientific
from a
method,
single-cell organism.
I agree that fallible humans do science, but science is not biased. It's a depersonalized secular methodology.
Sure, but what I'm saying is so the young Earth creation belief, it is completely scientifically backed. Like every question you could ask,
I strongly disagree with that.
You may disagree with their findings, but you will never, if you ask a legitimate young Earth creation scientist, he will never tell you this is the answer because the Bible tells me so. He will tell you, I don't think the Earth is this old because radiometric dating is not a reliable method to date potassium argon, or carbon dating is not reliable because there are other varying factors that can get involved to mess up the dating.
Yeah, but we know what those are.
But I'm just giving you examples. Like you would never hear them say, "For the Bible tells me so." Now they'll tell you after.
Have you ever been to AnswersInGenesis.com? Because that's exactly what they say.
Some of them do that, but then there are actual scientists like Dr. Andrew Snelling, right? He's a PhD geologist, and I really do have to get off here in a second. It's 2:40 a.m. But this dude, he does some work with Answers in Genesis. That's probably the last one I would go to. I do like some of their scientists. I don't like Ken Ham. I don't like the other people that work there that are super dogmatic. Good. And they don't. A lot of them will just like make emotional claims, and they'll call out other people for disagreeing with them who are Christians, and I think that's stupid. If someone has a different view, even if they believe the Earth is, billions of years old, universe billions of years old, and they believe in evolution, who cares? If Christ is their king, that's all that matters. To demonize them is completely absurd. But what I'm saying is I am a young Earth creationist because of the science and because of the Bible, because they both match. And so it's not because I think that, because the Bible says so, it has to be true. Forget science. If the Bible and science didn't match up, I would have a serious problem. Now, the Bible's not a scientific document, but what I'm trying to say is, again, if you have a legitimate scientific experiment or hypothesis that you can prove, like genetic entropy, I can send you a paper that Dr. Rob Carter did. He's a marine biologist now. He's also a biogeneticist. And he did through gene sequencing, him and Dr. Sanford did a study where they were able to trace back. Here, I have the specific details right here, and then I can send you the study. What he did was they did gene sequencing to 847 some people, women specifically for mitochondrial DNA. And so they looked at this mitochondrial DNA, and they gene sequenced it via the mutation rate. And so the mutation rate is about 0.1 per generation. So that's like 21 mutations per generation on average. You know, you're familiar with genetic entropy, right?
No. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that term.
So every generation has more genetic mutations than the prior generation.
And that's like that's been confirmed with
Yeah.
genome-wide association analyses, or
Yeah. Like, this is not disputed. This is like, so you'll have the young earth creationists will say that the mitochondrial Eve shows that all of them go back to the out of Africa theory, like the Botswana area, where the gene sequencing takes humanity back to this starting point. Now it's just the interpretation. In this specific experiment, they did it with that mutation rate, 21. If you divide 21 by 0.1, which is mutation rate per generation, so the 21 mutations equals to the 0.1, that'll get you about 210 generations. You multiply that by 25 years, estimated 5,250 years ago. This is, of course, using uniformitarianism in your method, meaning that it was always constant the entire time without any variance, which is unlikely, but it's fair to say. This is why young earth creationists from a genetic perspective will say that we actually don't go back that far. Humans had to have started then, because that's when the genetic mutation sequencing would stop. It can't go any farther because there would be no mutations. Otherwise, you would have to claim that with the standard view, the traditional paradigm of genetics, that means that 200,000 years ago, when the first human appeared, being, Homo sapien from Homo erectus, or Australopithecus, however you look at it. Some people have different views. That would mean that they had no mutations for 180 or 190 some thousand years. And then all of a sudden mutations just started happening. Well, that doesn't make any sense. That would be completely arbitrary. But they have the traditional paradigm, conventional paradigm has their own interpretation of the study. And so again, these are things that I would use to argue my case. And these are the things that they would use to argue their case, not the Bible told me so. So that's why I say, like, that's a legitimate study that they did. And Dr. Sanford had to he had to take his name off the paper and have Dr. Carter, who worked with him, even though he didn't invent the gene gun, he wasn't a professor at Cornell for 20 some years. He was newer into his career, but because he didn't have that young earth creation title on him, they accepted the paper in the National Library of Medicine. And so that to me, it's the same study, just different person's name. And so it wasn't the science, it was the person. That's wrong. You accepted it thinking it wasn't a young earth creationist, but if you knew it was, it wouldn't have been accepted.
I'm not sure if this is the guy. I was trying to look it up, but this John I don't know if he's the one, but I remember people kept telling me over and over again, most mutations are harmful, therefore blah 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 could never have happened. I kept hearing that over and over and over again. I was like, where does this come from? And I remember looking up a paper by a guy who's a proponent of young earth creationism, and he has this specific paper that says this. Now, I don't know if that's John Stanford, or is it Sanford or Stanford? Sanford. I don't know if that's him.
One of them.
Or not, because I can't find it. But when I looked into like his research, people are like, the main criticism here is his idea doesn't take into account even the idea that beneficial mutations occur, which is really silly to assume. So like genetic entropy would mean, like, it seems to be kind of loaded to frame it like, because mutations keep happening and mutations are bad, our genome would have disintegrated into, like, we would be non-functioning by this point. But that's not the reality of mutations at all in living things.
So this specific experiment does not say that. This is to sequence the genes to how far it would go at the mutation rate. That's what I'm talking about with this specific experiment. Now, the mutation issue that he does argue is that he does kind of argue what you say, but he would never claim that there are no beneficial mutations. Like the cave fish, obviously, they lost their sight. That was a mutation. This ended up being in benefit because since they lost their sight, their other senses increased, and so they were able to function better in the caves that they existed. Or the flies that Darwin, or not the flies, the beetles that Darwin observed that lost their wing function. You know, they were flying off the island and dying, getting stuck in the water because they were trying to fly. When they stopped using their wings, they started living better because they couldn't fly. And so they wouldn't get caught in that wind on the Galapagos Islands, and they would be able to, you know, not accidentally start flying and die.
We can't make vitamin C. We have the gene for it, but it doesn't work anymore. But it doesn't matter because we can supplement it with our diet. Like, there are harmful seeming, because I actually had a really long conversation with Voice of Reason last night. We talked about this. We talked about that exact one. Because he says you can't have loss of genetic information, or I can't remember exactly how it was framed, but it was something like that. I was like, well, we lost the ability to make vitamin C, but he said, like, natural selection can't do things that are harmful. I was like, well, I mean, that is how it's framed, but just because we lost the ability to synthesize vitamin C doesn't mean that it was necessarily harmful. And there are also these hilarious little frogs called saddle frogs that they're so small that their semicircular canals don't work anymore, and so when they jump, they have no sense of up, down, left, right, or anything, and so they just tumble wildly. It's actually really funny to watch. But anyways.
Well, listen, I gotta get off, man. It's late. I appreciate the conversation. Everyone loves you, man. They're giving you all the gifts. But
455 isn't very much. What was really funny is I usually don't pay attention to comments, but they're on top of your face. And it's been like this. I don't know if you paid any attention to them, but this was a very polarized, what do you want to call it? Like, not chat room or whatever. Because I saw it seemed like equal parts people saying, this Plant Pearson guy's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And this Truth Over Tea guy's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about. So I
welcome the hate. I welcome it.